Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Starra Priestaf. Dorothy, thank you for the introduction. I would like to begin today's presentation by focusing on one of the most devastating pandemics in human history, the bubonic plague, more commonly known as the Black Death or the Great Plague. The plague occurred in 3 pandemic waves and resulted in the death of an estimated 75 to 200 million people. The black rat was the main figure in the 14th century plague, and other animals to humans. Sorry for the gory pictures this early in the morning. At the onset of the infection, the patient develops a fever, headache, chills, and swollen, tender, and painful lymph nodes, or buboes, closest to where the bacteria, the flea bite, entered the body. Fortunately, today, reported cases of the plague have decreased greatly to an estimated 1 to 2,000 cases per annum worldwide. If detected and treated early, rates of mortality decrease significantly. Treatment for the bubonic plague includes antibiotics such as streptomycin and doxycycline. However, in the 14th century, there was no effective medical strategy against the plague. Because this pandemic exceeded human reason and knowledge, it, along with other diseases, were often regarded as signs or omens of impending evil, demonic possession, or God's wrath. In his 1568 treatise of the plague, Ambroise Paré, a French barber surgeon responsible for advancements in surgical techniques and battlefield medicine, stated the following: "It is a confirmed, constant, and received opinion in all ages among Christians that the plague and other disease which violently assail the life of man are often sent by the just anger of God, punishing our offenses." In turn, Roman Catholicism, the dominant religion in early modern Western Europe, called for individual and collective forms of activism and repentance. Mass processions and pilgrimages, collective vows, devotional literature, and the veneration of sanctified objects and relics. Religious devotion, therefore, became the curative method against the ravages of the plague. As one can imagine, the belief in a causal relationship between an embittered God and disease greatly undermined the validity of medical treatment for plague sufferers. Despite the inefficacy of medical treatment, doctors employed a variety of treatments aimed at rebalancing the body's humors through the expulsion of poison. Treatment included bloodletting, laxatives, emetics, hot compresses, and even opium. On the rare occasion of treatment, the doctor wore a plague suit, invented in 1619 by Charles Delorme, a royal French physician. This early hazmat suit was composed of a long leather coat, a mask, a beak-like covering over the nose filled with herbs and dried petals to mask the stench of death, and a wide hat to distinguish the individual as a physician. The doctor's arrival signaled an almost always unavoidable truth: the death of the patient. As a result, guilt and blame often befell the doctors who could not save their patients. Before the establishment of lazaretti, or plague hospitals created to quarantine and isolate the ill, victims died at home. The illness of one person, of one family member, often necessitated, through forced internment, the death of the entire family. In many instances, the plague sufferer sealed the fate of his healthy counterparts, insofar as entire households were shut up to prevent the spread of disease. The healthy and the sick thus commingled in a macabre dance in which the only chance for departure was death. How, I ask, did one escape even momentarily from the pains of suffering and the anxiety of death? In the early modern period, storytelling and reading represent an alternative method to medicine's ineffectual therapies and religion's call to repentance. One of the most salient examples of the relationship between storytelling and disease is Giovanni Boccaccio's 1353 masterpiece, The Decameron, in which a group of young men and women take shelter in a secluded villa outside Florence to flee the bubonic plague of 1348. Over the course of 10 days, the group finds consolation in the exchange of stories. To counter the disorder and anxiety brought on by news of the plague, Pamania, the group's leader, permits for only the circulation of pleasant stories and conversation. This careful delimitation of information is due to a belief that psychologically distressing news might introduce bad humors into the body, causing the listener to fall ill. Stories, in turn, hold a contradictory potential to inflict harm and illness or to serve as a remedy. Boccaccio creates an idyllic setting in which a countryside retreat protects his characters from both the spread of disease and the fear of falling ill. But what if one cannot easily withdraw from daily life to seek refuge outside of the city? François Rabelais, a French scholar, monk, and doctor, invites his ill readers to find solace in his grotesque and extravagant stories about two giants, a father and a son, and their exploits. Rabelais addresses his fatigued and ill readers who may not have the luxury of abandoning their plague-ridden villages for the countryside. In the fourth book of Pantagruel, it's one of the giants, that's the son, published in 1552, Rabelais encourages his readers to find laughter and solace in his bawdy and satirical prose. Readers, friends, if you turn these pages, put your prejudice aside, for really there's nothing here that's outrageous, nothing sick or bad or contagious. Not that I sit here glowing with pride, for my book, all you'll find is laughter. That's all the glory my heart is after. Seeing how sorrow eats you, defeats you, I'd rather write about laughing than crying, for laughter makes men human and courageous. Be happy. Rabelais continues the defense of his book as remedy by stating that, quote, many languishing, ill, or otherwise indisposed and afflicted people have, by reading these volumes, triumphed over their worries, experienced moments of happiness, and been granted a new cheerfulness and comfort. For Rabelais, the story temporarily mitigates the grief and pains of suffering by moving the reader to laughter and joy. A constant companion, the book fills the solitude of illness with fantastic images, symbols, and words. Why does Rabelais, a physician, place his confidence in stories? Why does he offer reading as a form of treatment? The answer may lie in the structure proper to the story. In literature, stories propose a coherent sequence of events and a discernible causality. Simply put, stories traditionally proceed in a linear fashion and contain a beginning, middle, and end. This structure informs our reception of the story and how we assign value and meaning to different events and characters. As readers and listeners, we take comfort in order, in the belief that one action will produce a certain outcome. A plus B will equal C. However, in the case of illness, the relationship between cause and effect is not always clear. A plus B does not always equal C. The mechanisms responsible for disease are not always clear or immediately discernible. Furthermore, illness and suffering interrupt or throw the rhythm of life into disorder. Daily activities, social commitments, work responsibilities, participation in community and family life are temporarily suspended or altogether abandoned. While Boccaccio and Rabelais offer compelling reasons for the importance of stories in the experience of illness, do we still have the same needs, especially in the wake of modern science, medicine, and technology? In modern Western society, should narrative occupy a place in the realm of medicine and patient care? Dr. Rita Sharon, a general internist at Presbyterian Hospital in New York City and the executive director of the program in narrative medicine at Columbia University, is interested in this very question. An authority and pioneer in the field of narrative medicine, Dr. Sharon focuses on the importance of storytelling in the healing process. Narrative medicine provides healthcare professionals the tools for recognizing, interpreting, and responding to patient stories. In her book pictured here, Narrative Medicine, Honoring the Stories of Illness, Sharon calls attention to the indirect nature of illness when stating that, quote, sickness does not travel in straight lines, and we who care for sick people have to be equipped for circuitous journeys if we want to be of help, end quote. Narrative gives order and structure to the windy, complicated, and often unspoken experiences of illness. However, the sharing of stories is not limited to the patients. in her training, she trains doctors, professors, psychologists, chaplains. So the sharing of stories is not limited to the patients. Through the exchange, analysis, reading, and writing of stories, healthcare providers learn firsthand how narrative informs and impacts their role in the care of others. From the exchange and reception of stories emerge stronger bonds of empathy, trust, and care between the practitioner and the patient. In her book, Sharon recounts the story of a patient suffering from multiple comorbidities and the necessity of finding a listener worthy of her devastating secret. I'm going to offer you an abbreviated version of the story that Dr. Sharon recounts in her book. I've had in my practice for many years a now 89-year-old African-American woman with hypertension, breast cancer, spinal stenosis, insomnia, and uncontrollable anxiety. For years, she took Librium for her nerves, unwilling to enter psychotherapy and unable to really talk about the source of her anxiety. She has considered herself sickly ever since she fell off a horse as a girl on a farm in South Carolina. For years, I was baffled by her illness. Recently, she told me the core of her sickness. She did not fall off a horse as a 12-year-old girl. She had been raped by a white boy from the neighboring farm. She knew at the time, young as she was, that she could not tell anyone about this. And so, for almost 80 years, she kept this secret, disfiguring her heart with wrath and fear. It took more than 20 years for me, the doctor, to become trustworthy enough to hear her tell it. And once she told her secret, in tears, in anguish, in fury, her health improved. She slept. Her back pain got better. She stopped taking her medications. Her heart had room to expand, not being in the grip of the untold, end quote. In the company of her physician, the patient reveals those points of correspondence, of causation responsible for her suffering. And for the first time, her voice counters the silenced, violated body of a young girl. Through the medium of the story, the patient and the doctor attend to this childhood trauma in order to treat the adult in fragile and failing health. As this example demonstrates, storytelling is not a solitary endeavor in which the listener assumes a passive, unaffected role. Rather, the patient's history serves as an important vehicle for reflection and revelation on the part of the doctor. After more than a 20-year struggle to diagnose accurately the woman's illness, Dr. Sharon recognizes the curative power of the story and the still existent limits of modern medicine. Even today, many centuries after the ravages of the Black Death, I believe that we still need the story in its multiple incarnations, reading, telling, and listening. The story is not confined to the realm of literary studies, but resides, I believe, at the intersection of numerous disciplines: medicine, history, psychology, and philosophy, to name a few. By exploring these connections, we can better attend to those called to suffer the obscure and turbulent journey of illness. When life exceeds reason and knowledge, narrative remains a vital tool for creating community, causing joy and laughter, or rescuing one another from the pains, anonymity, and solitude of suffering. Thank you.
So like the first examples that you brought from the 1300s, I think, highlighted that only pleasant stories can be good, and the story that woman had to tell is apparently very cruel. Has that changed? That sort of like it doesn't matter as long as the narrative structure provides sort of like through the structure a means of structuring experience events, or is there still something today that you sort of see like a preference for only the pleasantness of good storytelling, basically?
Right. Thanks for your questions. And this, I think, is a challenge for me. I mean, on a kind of personal side, and anyone who works in the early modern period, we're always defending our right to exist. and why should students take our courses? Why should we still write books about many topics that have been explored in depth? And so I'm aware, and as I was writing this and revising it, that the function of the story and its incarnations obviously changes over the many centuries. And so stories that are psychologically distressing, that are negative, especially when there was this constant barrage of news coming from the city about the death of the Black Plague, that that they were really limiting, or at least in this fictional tale, they were limiting the content of the narrative. I know, at least having worked with Dr. Sharon, she has this, and she created narrative medicine. She has a PhD in English literature and as well as a medical degree. That she's not limiting in any way. So I think for maybe instead of focusing on the content, it's about the curative process or the therapeutic process that is involved in speaking one story. I think post-17th century, we're kind of trying to get back to similar ways of thinking and of conceptualizing the body in relationship to the mind, and also lived experience as embodied and not disembodied. So,
okay. Thank you.